hear like, "Oh my God, you don't speak Tamil,"
Tamil.
or
All
and
right. Okay.
but the funny thing is like since I'm South Indian both in America and never whenever I go to India when I'm out of the South, like people like start going, "Oh my God, like you're Indian, how you do not speak Hindi?" I'm going because, so like for me, I was got a completely new concept going, wow, like I've never known any place full of like Indians where they start asking like, "You don't know Tamil? What?" So
Yeah, I've had Northern Indian friends who travel to Tamil and Tamil Nadu, and they tell me like, even when they speak, like even when they can speak Hindi, they kind of refuse to do it out of a sense
oh
of
yeah.
like ethnic pride.
Oh yeah, yeah. Tamils have like I have had like really long like yeah Dravidian
Yeah,
stands for a while,
yeah,
and I mean it's kind of hilarious. I mean, there's some people there's some like attitude like that in Kerala also, but I think it's
mm.
just the fact like there's like a lot more pride in Kerala going, aha, we're educated that we will speak Hindi, though.
Yeah,
Although I think the majority of like them, from what I remember from my family, just my family, is like they can understand Hindi pretty well, and
mm.
they most of them think they can speak it. They can't actually speak it that well.
I
Not as
see.
well as they think they can.
Yeah, fair enough, I guess.
Yeah.
So, I guess I thought for this episode we discuss. We'll start with like kind of the recent incident between India and Pakistan, and then kind of move on to the kind of the internal issue, the internal situation in Kashmir.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
would that be? Because I think you focused on Kashmir, right, as part of your
Yeah,
studies.
yeah. So the specifically, I wrote my thesis on like looking at India's counterinsurgency campaigns in Kashmir and Chhattisgarh.
Mm,
And interestingly enough, like Chhattisgarh was a case study that like kind of started the whole was like I guess you could say the case study I used to form my theory, but
mm,
I can ended up because of just like the dynamics in Kashmir. Kashmir was what like inspired me to like really dive deep. And
right.
if you like ever listen to me talk. Well, I guess you're gonna be listening to me talk for next hour. But if you ever listen to me talk or write,
Yeah.
I have a tendency just to like start rambling on. And so even in my thesis, my like chapter on Chhattisgarh was only like 30 pages, but
Mm.
my chapter on Kashmir ended up being 52 pages by supposed to be like the secondary case study.
Yeah, I
Like
always find it interesting that because I understand in India, technically more people have been killed by the Naxalites, right? Then,
yeah, because it was not just kill, but like it's just frankly it's been there for like depending on when you want to date, it has been there like since the 60s and has
mm,
like affected. It's like I think at the very height, the Naxalites more or less had control over one third of like India.
yeah, but I guess because of the post 9/11 situation, we focus more on Kashmir because it's kind of
Yeah,
more relatable,
that
I suppose.
Yeah, that and like there's like this very and I guess we can get into it in coming to the backgrounder, but like both India and like Pakistan have like pretty much based their identity around keeping Kashmir in a
Mm,
weird way, which
yeah.
the Naxalites has never like really affected.
Mm, it's interesting. Um, so anyway, does it say live on your end?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, then I guess we can start. Um, if you like, because I normally edit the videos, so if we fuck up or anything, it's okay. I fuck up all the time, so
I be I have like plenty of fuck ups and like I can probably guess like in like with the next couple of days I'll like and you're like, oh my God, I got this fact wrong. Here's the right number. Here's like the right number, right year, or like right name, or this is how you really pronounce the name. Uh
yeah,
that's
yeah.
how I am.
All right. Well, yeah. Welcome everyone to the next episode of my Silk Roads and Monsoon Winds podcast, the podcast on everything modern Asia. I'm your host Imran. You can follow me on Twitter at MalayBoy97. Today joining me is Hari Prasad. He's a research assistant at the Hudson Institute, specializing in South Asia, MENA, and international relations. He holds a BA from Marquette University, as well as a master's degree from George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs, where he focused on Middle Eastern and South Asian politics and security. Uh, he has previously interned and worked at the State Department Marquette Center for Peacemaking, the United States Institute of Peace, and as I understand, you taught English in the West Bank for a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well,
That's
welcome,
bad.
Harry. Welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Just one small correction. I'm no longer at the Hudson Institute.
Ah, okay. My
Yeah.
apologies.
Yeah, no problem. Just it's a good thing to know. And also like usually Hudson tends to be pretty like stringent on like having RAs be like on these podcasts or writing articles. So I like to just put myself as independent so I have more freedom to do it.
Okay,
Not
thank
that
you. Yeah.
Yeah, not that it matters because like not I'm not there anymore as of this week,
Yeah.
but yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right. Out of curiosity, what got you interested in specializing in Indian counterinsurgency in the first place?
So like I guess like everyone is getting specialized in Indian counterinsurgency was part of my longer journey of becoming a IR person.
Mm,
So because like of course growing up in the United States, probably the most like formative political event that happened was the September 11th attacks.
mm,
And of course, like, that caused like a huge thing of terrorism, but like also like from where we were like the only like one of the only Indian families in Wisconsin where we were living in Wisconsin. Like the atmosphere affected us a lot differently. So I remember like even like in the first week after the attacks, except for like when they drove us to school, like we did not go anywhere out. And I remember
mm,
like how even my mom like the day of 9/11 she went out to like get medicine from my brother, and she described it being like the scariest thing she's ever did, just because of the way everybody looked at her and the way they like almost seemed like they're about to lynch her or mob her or something like that.
mm,
And that like kind of then there's like that, and I remember like especially if for anyone who knows about like Wisconsin law, like Wisconsin's in the center of the middle of the United States, it's not like really connected to anything internationally really. Like
mm,
even though we're next to Canada, it doesn't affect us, so there's never real like international environment. But like because we used to go to India every year, like the stuff in Kashmir, like I remember being alive in a cargo conflict where I was at school like getting scared of like, oh my God, India Pakistan going to war, and like most people at my school, and this is like keep on, this included teachers because I was only in like not even fifth grade yet. Like going,
mm.
they didn't even know about the conflict or like, oh, that's interesting. While like I'll be scared. So like that's always like kind of like gathered this. And initially when I started getting international affairs, 'cause I could tell you like there's one person who got me into international affairs, and it's Fareed Zakaria
Mm. The
because he wrote
CNN contributor, right?
wait, what?
The CNN contributor.
Yeah,
He,
yeah. So at the time he wasn't even CNN, he was just on Newsweek.
yeah.
Uh, because he wrote an article in 2007, 2008 called like the the rise of the rest, and that was like even though like I had been traveling to India for so long, I never thought of like India as like this like rising economy, like this like powerful like this rising power in the world.
Mm,
So like for me, like that completely opened my eyes because like my parents were very stereotypically Indian. They wanted me to become an engineer or doctor, so they did not have me focus on politics
mm,
at all. But this like I mean in national politics at least. So like this really opened my eyes to like, oh wow, like this is really interesting. As a result of that, I started reading, and then like I got into international affairs in my college. And like initially, I thought I was going to be like I was going to be like the next Henry Kissinger. I was going to be grand strategist. So I was going to know about every single country in the world.
mm,
I realized that very quickly on that's not realistic. So I started like studying Arabic in my undergrad, and then I realized like besides Middle East, just South Asia, like especially India itself, is such a fascinating country. Just from like as like if you're like a student of international affairs, like it's hard to deny like India is like this huge country, it has so many ethnicities, languages, and all that stuff,
mm,
and how it all works together. Just like sometimes like just thinking about it just completely blows my mind, like how it's been extremely successful in one sense.
mm,
And because of the interest of like that drove me to international affairs, like the terrorism, non-state actors, insurgency, counterinsurgency, like that's kind of what inspired me. Like, what, I need to look at India, and like the fact is, like today, I would say, like especially in the United States, India's like conflicts, except for maybe Kashmir, is now like well examined, despite the
mm,
fact like it has like a lot of conflicts, a lot of places we could learn from, and
mm.
also just a really fascinating country. As a, like I said before, I kind of ramble on and give
No,
long
no,
answers.
it's all right. No worries. Um, okay, so I guess um, so we're here today to discuss the recent India-Pakistan conflict, as well as the larger issue of Kashmir, which has kind of bedeviled relations between both
Mhm.
countries since independence. So maybe just a quick recap of what happened recently. So obviously, as you know, after a suicide attack against a Indian paramilitary convoy in the
Mhm.
Pulwama area of Kashmir on February 14 that killed 40 soldiers, India launched airstrikes against apparent terrorist bases in the Pakistani town of Balakot,
Mhm.
killing what they claimed were 300 terrorists. And in response, Pakistan the next day launched its own airstrikes against quote unquote non military targets in India. And in the ensuing dogfight, an Indian plane was shot down and a pilot captured, who was later returned to India on March 1st as a sign of goodwill by Islamabad. Um, I guess when you kind of look at just looking back at this series of incidents, um, who do you think kind of came out the victor, I suppose, in this series of recent incidents? Maybe not in a sense of kind of media optics, but more like in a strategic sense.
Oh, so I mean, to be honest, in a there's people who claim like oh India won it because like like India crossed a completely new threshold. It's so that it had like the possible it could actually it was willing and possibly able to like reach all the way deep into Pakistan because like Balakot's not like in Pakistani held Kashmir. It's all the way in like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So that's actually pretty deep in Pakistan.
Mm,
And so like that's why like people were saying like oh like India won this. In my own opinion, that I don't think that's really true because like so diplomatically, yeah, India I could say like probably had won this tactical battle. But and the larger, of course, you said like you mentioned like media, like I think like Pakistan actually came off looking a lot better. But also like I'm not entirely convinced that like things have changed because essentially Pakistan has showed like we are willing to go as far as India's willing to go, but India still has not found a way to really deter us at the sub-conventional level, which
mm,
is like what started this whole like this back and forth anyway.
mm,
And it's like the same problem like when like India had the surgical strikes in 2016,
mm,
where a lot one like even when you look back into operations, like it was purely a very tactical thing. Like they didn't hit any like actual training camps. They hit purely launch pads. So like it's not
mm,
like theirs were like set structures that like had a very important militants or terrorists and whatever that, but rather like temporary structures to like help people get across the border.
mm,
But for like wait, I think too much of like the dialogue, or at least the popular dialogue, was like we did this, we showed Pakistan we were able to do this, but like Pakistan still continued its policy, and I think it might have even escalated. If I remember the numbers correctly, it might have even escalated after that. So
mm.
ultimately, I think whether we'll see in the next couple of months what actually happens, but I think like right now, like it's too early to say India won. I think right now it's looking more like a stalemate than anything else.
Mm.
Which and in this case, like a stalemate's not what India wants because it needs to actually deter Pakistan from using this stuff in the future. So a stalemate works in Pakistan's favor, in my opinion.
And now a lot of scholars have stated that India's response to the Pulwama attack and the airstrikes were pretty unprecedented. And like you said, it
Mm.
was not like the surgical strikes after the Uri attacks in 2016, which took place in disputed Kashmir. This was strikes
Yeah.
in Pakistan proper. Like,
Hmm.
what do you think compelled India to kind of raise the threshold and kind of raise its risk levels?
I think for, like partially because like one like they couldn't do another surgical strikes because unfortunately like the Modi government right now we see like a lot of politicization. Oh my God, my English is completely off.
It's okay. I
Politiza
I fuck up all the time.
I mean, sad part like this is my like the only language I speak fluently. Um, but like partially because like I was even thinking like before like India launched the airstrikes was like it can't do another surgical strikes because Pakistan knows it's looking for that.
Mm,
And if it does not surgical strikes, people in like whether it's the BJP's base or just a wider base, like they know like, oh, this is not going to do it. And like also like India's been facing like sponsored terrorism for a long time. Like people have been wanting like actual like sincere action. And
mm.
I think like going okay, like surgical strikes did not do anything to like deter Pakistan. So we need to make an actual decision. It's like I forgot. I'm trying to remember what the word for this is, but like it's part of like this giant game of like India. I think part of it is like India is trying to figure out what is the limits of how much they can push Pakistan while keeping it relatively under control.
Is this
And I
a
feel
brickmanship?
brickman. Yeah, I think they're trying to figure out brickmanship
Mm,
still. Of like saying how far can we go with like in this issue without like risking out conventional war or even nuclear conflict, God forbid.
mm.
So I think like at it was at the point where like they decided like we had to send like a serious message, not only just to like Pakistan, but and to Jaish-e-Mohammed, but like our own population too.
Now, India obviously is facing elections in April, as I understand. Do
Mhm.
you think that probably played a part in causing India to launch these strikes?
I mean, so as as far as I'm concerned, like I think there's a small part of it that played in like maybe the BJP's thinking, but I would not say personally that was like the driving factor, the main driving factor behind it. I think like the driving factor was like they're trying to deter these strikes, and like we know like this government has taken a much more hardline approach in some senses
Hmm.
to they say we're not tolerating this anymore.
Hmm.
So, and I think like the reality is like regardless of what happened, whether it's like another surgical strikes or some other attack, it would have been politicized by all the parties. And like we see that right now, like the BJP is like trying to say we won the Balkan strikes, we're the ones who are doing this, and like they're apparently going to make a movie out of this. But I don't think I don't think that's going to be that. I don't think that was the main pushing factor of that.
I see. Now, recently Pakistan stated that they were going to crack down on the Jaish-e-Mohammed group. Do you think that this recent incident will cause Pakistan to act more decisively against terrorism, or do you think, to use the phrase that Hussein Haqqani, the former Pakistani ambassador, referred to, the Musharraf playbook, which is basically play victim, promise some action, but ultimately do very little?
So Hussein Khan was my former boss. Cut that part. I mean, yeah, I don't need to cut the part out.
Yeah.
I'll say cut out this part. Like, I don't necessarily agree with him on everything.
Mm,
But I do agree with Hussein Haqqani, Ambassador Haqqani, that yeah, they're playing the Musharraf playbook, because like what they arrested Azhar, but then he's back out on the streets,
mm,
and like I think like a lot of the major courses like that happened to it, uh the court cases they recently brought up were all dismissed or something like that, or at least
mm,
against some of the major figures. And like if they're like really serious about it, like going, okay, like we don't know what the camp Indy targeted. I don't think there's been good evidence like that the camp was destroyed.
mm.
However, I don't see Pakistan like actually closing down the camps. They say they took control, but I haven't seen anyone actually said like, well, the camp is actually closed down, or the trade camp closed down. And like like and I was like discussing this with someone else before, like whether Imran Khan has a say in this, and I honestly don't know if he has a say, and I actually don't know how he feels about like Jaish e Mohammed or Lashkar-e-Taiba or those groups. But like as far as I see it, there hasn't been like a real imp for like two reasons. Like I don't think anything in this incident would suggest like Pakistan would need to crack down on these groups at all.
Mm.
And two, I just think like with the situation happening within Pakistan right itself, it would be like really bad. It would actually be the Pakistani military part thinking like even if we did want to crack down, which I don't think they're thinking about, I think they would say like okay, it would be too suicidal for us to actually crack down on these groups.
But what does Pakistan actually hope to accomplish with using these proxy groups? Is it they want to foment unrest in Kashmir to get international attention, or is it to acquire territory? What exactly do they hope to do with these proxy groups?
It's like a mix of motivation. So I and like also would point out like it's not just like it's not just like international factors motivating them. It's a lot of domestic factors motivating them too. Because like let's go. And then I think Christine Fair's work has been like done a really great job. That even if like somehow Kashmir was no longer on the table, like Lashkar-e-Taiba is too important domestically for Pakistan to ever crack down on it. Because like it provides schools, it provides a lot of welfare networks,
Mm,
and a lot of militant groups have like these play important like kind of like I guess you could say political roles that they can like help take out Pakistan's rivals. Like there's even suggestions in like Balochistan, like a lot of Salafi groups
mm,
have like the implicit backing of the Pakistani state in Saudi Arabia to help kill other Baluchis, so that way it could like help bring Balochistan under control. But in terms of towards Kashmir, I think is like one like they've been wanting to acquire Kashmir, so like I don't actually think they believe they can acquire Kashmir through like the use of these proxies, but they believe that they can like, cause enough foment and unrest to like have Kashmiris now want to be part of India, and two
mm,
like it helps internationalize the whole problem, because like especially now that both India and Pakistan are like nuclear powers, and Pakistan's like continuous policy of like supporting groups in Kashmir, like it does like cause like the warrior like what happens if this escalates? Like even like with the recent incident, like I remember like a lot of us here in DC were asking like, oh my God, like they conducted airstrikes against each other. what happens next, like who's going to stop like the brinkmanship, because like you can at the end of the day, like one of the things I had a problem with the like a lot of Indian assumptions was like they assumed like the game of brinkmanship was a one-person game, that Pakistan
Mm,
would start this thing off with like a state-sponsored attack, so then India would respond, and that's that.
mm,
But they keep on forgetting that like Pakistan's another actor, so of course they're going to respond too, and that caused like a lot of worries. Like, okay, like if Pakistan's going to do this, it's a worry of the international committee, because like India does not want the Kashmir issue internationalized.
mm,
Pakistan does. So I think that's one reason. Two is also like there's like a lot of legit worries. Some overstated, some not overstated, that the Pakistani military isn't much weaker than the Indian military is. So like they need the help of these non-state actors to like confront India. I
mm.
think like what was the phrase they used? Like it was like death by it was it's part of their strategy of death by a thousand cuts
So we're kind
to
of just weakening India over time, I suppose.
yeah, weakening India over time. And also like part of like this rationale, it comes goes back to the 1971 war, where in 1971, when Pakistan faced a civil war, India intervened and like created Bangladesh or all of that. And like a lot of Pakistan military, there is this like this really strong desire for revenge, and part of like the what India did at the time was support the Bengali resistance, the Mukti Bahini,
Mm,
and so there's like some element of the Pakistan military that says like, we need to do the same thing, like we will like avenge, we'll avenge what happened in 1971 through like acquiring Kashmir,
mm.
and
Okay.
that's like some of the reasons, yeah.
Now, the Kashmir issue obviously has effectively been one of the main sticking point in India-Pakistan relations since almost independence. Um, Now, India likes to claim that the unrest that we see in Kashmir today, which is effectively a
Yeah.
25, 30 year long insurgency, is effectively fueled solely by Pakistan, that it's Pakistanis funded and trained militants which are fomenting unrest. Do you think that's a fair statement to make, or do you think it's also a failure of kind of Indian governance and Indian counterinsurgency strategies in Kashmir?
Oh, I think like in order like Pakistan, I guess the best way to put it, like Pakistan is throwing fuel on the flames, but there's
Mm,
already flames. There were already flames to begin with.
mm,
Like so like I like to bring up the example of the 1965 war. So like in the 1965 war, to acquire Kashmir, Pakistan started sneaking in a lot of irregular troops,
mm,
like to like go to Kashmir, started like a domestic uprising, and then like Pakistan would use that as an excuse to like intervene and like conquer Kashmir.
mm,
But what happened instead was like as Pakistan was doing this, local Kashmiris actually told the Indian military like, "Hey, the Pakistanis are coming in." And that's what starts the 1965 war. In contrast, like the uprising that began in like really 1989, 1987, depending on what year you want to use, was like purely domestic and was like a cause of like what India did instead. And I think Pakistan like took advantage of that. Like they've been using this to take advantage of it because like for them like Kashmir is just as much as an ideological issue as anything else.
mm.
Uh, and so I think like Indians, there's like a lot of like Pakistan deserves part of the blame, but I think like the problem with the Indians is they put too much blame on Pakistanis to recognize what's actually happening in their own failures within the Kashmir Valley itself.
So, in a nutshell, what exactly has India's counterinsurgency strategy been in Kashmir? Is it like a combination of kind of military force and kind of so-called population-centric policies, or has it just been purely military force?
It depends on who you ask. So, I remember when I was doing research for my thesis, uh, like if you look at like Indian military doctrine, like they have like a doctrine on what they call the doctrine of subconventional conflict.
Mm,
Not subconventional conflict. It's called the acronym is DISCO.
disco.
DSC DSCO.
Mm,
Forgetting what the last word. Um, my memory is like failing me right now, but I'm forgetting what the last name was actually, what the last word actually is.
okay.
But it essentially deals with like how India thinks about like some conventional conflict. It was like released relatively recently, like in 2000. So like, according, if you look at that doctrine, and keep in mind this is specifically Indian military, like the Indian army,
Mm,
because like that's an important part I'll get to in a little bit. But like so to them it's like both military force and but also like wham hearts winning the hearts and minds. So very similar to like how the U.S. would say it is.
Mm,
In reality though, I would say like the problem is it's been excessive use of like security forces with like little effort to political effort. So like
mm,
especially in the early years of the Kashmir insurgency, it was a very, very, very hard response. Partially because like as like some military people say like so there's like actually we could get to this point later, but like that there was like this real emergency that the Indians perceived
mm,
they needed to do. Like they felt like they actually were going to lose Kashmir within overnight.
mm.
But but and but as a result, like they used a lot of harder measures and like a lot of people and like so. My apologies, I'm forgetting all the names
It's
of people
okay.
right now. But so the governor of Kashmir at the time, I remember because I wrote in my thesis that like he literally believed that this was not like a Indian like this wasn't due to Indian failure, but this was purely uh a Pakistani conspiracy, and
Mm,
that everybody on the streets were like just Pakistanis or being paid by the Pakistanis, so they're fair game.
mm,
And as a result, like they just used a purely like security effort, and it wasn't until like really they launched Operation. I'm going to butcher this. Operation Sadbhavana
mm-hmm.
to which was like this is where like they're supposedly winning the hearts and minds of people.
Mm,
And there's like some effort like they are putting some effort behind this. And there's like this was launched in 1998. But I think in reality, like the way most Kashmiris would see it, like this has been a purely military effort.
mm. Yes, as I understand, the violence kind of spiked in 2016 following the death
Yeah.
of Burhan Wani, who was a militant commander, and you've seen increasing kind of uh, escalations and conflict between the civilians and security forces. Um, is it fair to say that oftentimes the civilians are kind of caught in between, and that kind of poor training on the part of security forces kind of is fueling this crisis?
There is definitely poor training on security forces. So before we get to like the larger question about that, it's worth noting because like so usually as it's portrayed, there's like three stages of the Kashmir insurgency.
Mm,
There's the initial years led by like you could say the JKLF, the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, which was I would say nominally secular, but in
mm,
reality you could debate that. But like they were like they wanted full independence for Kashmir, like from both India and Pakistan. But both like India started gaining control of the situation, and Pakistan like did not like these guys, so they kind of undermined the JKLF. Plus, so this led to the second phase, which was led by Hizbul Mujahideen,
mm,
which which Burhan Wani was part of. But the important thing, and this like happened in 1991, 1992, and lasted you could say it lasted roughly till like late 90s, early 2000s. But the important thing of these first two stages is that the insurgency was primarily done by Kashmiris.
mm,
Because like after that you have like instead like you have groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish Muhammad, etc. taking over. And these are groups primarily made up of people who are not Kashmiris. They're like Punjabis,
mm,
Pashtuns, or other foreign fighters. But and but what now what you're seeing that kind of scary is like with the of course like the death of Burhan Wani, but like even like the recent deaths of people who are being recruited, who are being killed, are primarily Indian Kashmiris.
mm,
And there's like yeah, poor training on security forces because like the nature of like the conflict has changed. And like I know like I saw you did this for your last podcast that you had recommended books and readings. There's like this very excellent book that came out recently by David Devdas called The Generation of Rage in Kashmir.
mm-hmm,
I think it's a fantastic book to understand like what's happening in Kashmir like nowadays. And it's like how you have these civilians who are just very like you have because right now you have like a whole generation of kids who have grown up knowing nothing but like Indian soldiers on the street. Like
mm,
in the 90s, early 2000s, a lot of Kashmiris could remember like could actually point out like, okay, we didn't feel like we were living under our occupation.
Mm,
We knew the days where like, there wasn't like checkpoints and this and that. But like a lot of people growing like Burhan Wani or all his compatriots, a lot of people like who are in, either joined the insurgency or like supporting the insurgency, they are people like definitely younger than us who don't remember growing up in an environment like that. All they know is like conflict, and especially within like 2000, like I'll say like 2000s to like 2015, 2016, like violence was relatively low in Kashmir,
mm,
but you still had as many Indian security forces on the street, which of course, like after a while, like if you're growing up in that, it's going to feel oppressive, not like it's not what the environment you want to be growing up in. So, and like they're becoming a lot of Kashmiris are becoming influenced, like what they see on TV, like stone throwing in Palestine, like the same narratives and stuff like
mm,
that. And so like there are because now we know like happening in a lot of like when the security forces are doing a lot of operations that they face the trouble of like people like pelting stones at them.
mm,
And one like yeah, like definitely the security forces aren't trained because like I remember probably have to correct the year on this, but like I think when 2015, 2016 when like when the big protest began and the mass blinding happened,
mm,
like that was a disaster for India. And like I think Ajay Shukla, who's like a former military officer himself, like did an examination of this because this is primarily done by police forces. And he's like the police forces did not know how to treat protesters, did not know how to like deal with this crowd. So as a result, like they got scared and started using their weapons
mm.
whenever they felt like they're being confronted. So I think like yeah, I gave a really long answer to your question. But yeah, like partially going yeah, there's like a lot and enforcers don't know how to do it, and there are definitely plenty of Kashmiri civilians like who are just like getting caught up, not getting caught up, or who are like bystanders. But like there's also like a lot of Kashmiri civilians who just want to confront the security forces because like frankly like I know there's like actually a former military officer who's definitely not a who's definitely not like a pacifist, pointing out like, every day if you see like a soldier pointing a gun at you, growing up, you want to think that guy's your enemy.
Mm. And has India ever attempted any kind of like de-radicalization strategy of like trying to wean like young people off kind of terrorism and jihadism?
I mean, so it depends who you ask. Like, so a couple of military officers say like, oh yeah, we definitely did that. We had these programs, this and that. Like, there's not much good information on it to be honest. So like,
Mm,
you can't really. That's and like in general, like India's like de-radicalization programs, like CVE programs, like so I do like a lot of my research in general focuses on CVE in Middle East and South Asia.
mm,
I could not like and I can know like people in India who write about CVE or similar subjects, but I honestly could not tell you like if India has like a real CVE strategy or anything like that, or like what exactly their plans are. Like they have some stuff for like the Maoists, but like
mm.
or like how to like DDR some people, but like nothing really concrete. It's more hoping like, oh, hey, you guys will come surrender for us, and if you surrender, that'll be good. But not like, oh, if we capture you, this is what we're going to do for you, you know?
I'm kind of curious to know um, has the Kashmir conflict been kind of like what we've seen in like the southern Philippines, for example, where like it started off as kind of like a purely nationalist uprising, and it just increasingly became more religious in character.
Yeah, so I mean, there is that. So like, so JKLF, like I mentioned, was nominally secular.
Mm,
Like of course, like they're nominally secular. They were like responsible for like the you can call it ethnic cleansing or whatever. Like, are the Kashmiri Pandits from the valley.
mm,
And like even like I'm thinking the initial years of the conflict, the initial like 2 or 3 years of the conflict, half the people killed by the JKLF were Kashmiri Pandits. And just keep in mind like Kashmiri Pandits are only 5% of the population. So
mm,
there's a lot of indications like these guys are specifically targeted. But that said, like when you lost the JKLF, what you guys the next group that came was the Hizbul Mujahideen. The Hizbul Mujahideen was like unapologetically Islamist. It was like because like they were heavily connected to the Jamaat Islami party in Jammu and Kashmir.
mm,
Then once like they're gone, you have like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jamaat. I mean Jaish sorry, Jaish Muhammad, and
Mm,
Lashkar-e-Taiba is a Salafi Ali Hadith group, while
mm,
Jaish Muhammad is a Deobandi group. So like there has been like this like increasingly religioization of like the conflict. But that said, like I think like the main fail of like the problem like a lot of Indian politicians and a lot of Indian analysts and commentators is that they tend to like just say like, oh, if it wasn't for like Islamicism or whatever, the Kashmir conflict wouldn't have happened.
mm,
So it's like a combination of both nationalism and especially now more so than in the past, like a form of like Islamic identity.
mm. Yeah,
And
and kind of the recent election of the BJP in 2014 and Narendra Modi and this kind of observed rise in Hindu nationalism in India, has that kind of contributed to this kind of increasing alienation on the part of Kashmiris?
oh yeah, like so I remember so for my thesis I talked to like uh I talked to like what was it? Three people total, but only two of them let me like use their words in my thesis. They're like, they're like nowadays they live here in the West, but they grew up in the conflict. And I think by and large, their entire thing was like they're Kashmir separatists.
Mm,
And they were like pointing out like, okay, like we always have this complaints about India, like we want to be separatists, we want Kashmir to be independent, but definitely the BJP has brought like a whole new level.
mm.
And especially because like crap, is it Article 370 that like gives autonomy to Kashmir? So sorry, I'm really bad with some of the stuff and right now.
Oh,
Like it's
okay,
been a
it's all right. I forget shit all the time.
oh yeah, so article yeah, I think it's Article 370 that's like in the Indian Constitution that gives like some autonomy to Kashmir was uh one like a lot of Kashmiris have their own like perception of like how Article 370 has been like undermined by the Indian government, but then
Mm,
like the BJP is explicitly like that they want to like Hindu nationalists are explicitly that we want to get rid of Article 370 and like pass some other laws because like right now like technically speaking, it's hard. It's really difficult to own land. I don't know if it's impossible, but like technically by law it should be impossible like to own land if you're not Kashmiri.
mm,
It's actually not related to Article 370. It's actually from like earlier laws passed before when passed from that to like stop rich Punjabis from coming in. But there is like this thing of like okay, like the BJP, not only are they explicitly like giving us autonomy, but they're also explicitly anti-Muslim. And
mm,
like this is like there is like this thing of like okay this is drive like Hindutva it is driving like this kind of fear of like okay like what's our place in India
mm.
as a Muslim majority state for ideology that does not want Muslims.
And has Hindu nationalism kind of like has it affected relations between Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri Hindus?
In a sense, yeah, because there's like some really good books about this. Like so I can recommend Rahul Pandita. He's like a journalist from Kashmir. He's actually a Kashmiri pundit who wrote a fantastic book called Our Moon Has Blood Clots. It's about the story of him and his family because since he was growing up in that period, he and his family were part of the people who fled Kashmir because
Mm,
of like during this phase of ethnic cleansing.
mm,
And he made this point like because even though I would not say he's a Hindu nationalist because he definitely has like it's a very traumatic period and stuff like that, but like he made this really good point like during the time when like especially right after the ethnic cleansing happened, like the general left in India completely failed to acknowledge what was happening
mm,
and like completely ignored Kashmiri pundits. And instead, what has happened is that the Hindutva groups, the BJP, like RSS, BJP, they capitalized on that, and they're going through camps trying to recruit Hindu pundits.
mm,
And like you can argue whether like reality these guys actually care about Hindu pundits more than like a talking point. But
mm,
like there's like this thing of, like for a lot of there are like a lot of Hindu pundits who are like right wing Hindutvas are very supportive of right wing Hindutvas and view like okay we have seen like what Islamic terrorism really is so therefore we need to support these guys. And I think that has actually contributed more like kind of to like the bigger divide between like Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri pundits
mm,
and like Hindus in general, especially what we saw like after Pulwama and Balakot and everything like that, was in Jammu. Now, I mean, throughout India, like a lot of Kashmiri Muslims were being attacked, but even in Jammu, like Kashmiri Muslims were being attacked by like Kashmiri Hindus. So
mm. And so I mean, as I understand, one of the strategies India has kind of pursued in Kashmir as part of its larger counterinsurgency strategy has been holding regular elections as a kind of way of legitimizing India's claim to Kashmir. But as I understand it, they haven't really held elections recently. Like many by-elections have been kind of postponed. Is the kind of democratic space in Kashmir kind of like receding?
That's the worry. So like like so partially like like they had the they made a recent announcement when the Indian elections in general throughout the country supposed to be held.
Mm,
And like there's actually this controversy happening right now about like when the Kashmiri elections are going to be held because and so it's interesting. So Omar Abdullah, who by any measure is like a pro mainstream politician, pro India, secular. Like I remember watching this interview because he's absolutely furious because like apparently there because like like a lot of BJP like the of course the government in Kashmir collapsed because it was like a coalition of the BJP and the PDP, People's Democratic Party,
mm,
which who in one sense are very opposite sides of the spectrum.
mm,
Could like so I mean like I don't think anyone had really expected that coalition to work, but collapse now there's like governor's rule, now there's president's rule. But like right now like I think from what like a lot of Kashmir politicians were promised that the election would be held very early on.
mm,
It seems like right now like that election has been delayed, and
mm,
that's actually really, really infuriating because like so in the initial years of insurgency, they held the election in 1987, which was heavily rigged, and the next election they held was in 1996, which is way too long of a space of time for a democratic country like India. And now like there is like the general fear like right now in like the fact like the elections in Kashmir keep on getting delayed over and over and over again is that we're going to see another period going to see like another period like the 90s where like the civilians didn't really have power and like this is allowing like other groups to like kind of like you said shrink the democratic space. So I think like that's actually a very real fear right now.
And
And
like, what is the reasoning they give for like continuously postponing elections? Like they're afraid that like separatist elements will gain power, or what
oh
exactly
no
is
like, I mean like not even that like I mean there's like a lot of like kind of like nooks and crannies that can like so I think like since like the 90s it's either that I might be confusing things but like I think they usually have to like say they respect the Indian Constitution and the Indian Constitution does not allow separatists really to
it?
run but like 1987 like I think like by most people's standard like a lot of like people who were friendly to separatists would have run would have won it but it has like also like issues with the Congress Party and competition. But the rationale that they give is like, oh, we don't have enough security forces to secure the area
Mm.
to help elections. And like so I remember and like this happened like, again like just in the last week. Omar Abdullah would say like we were assured by the Home Minister himself that like no matter what like they would not have separate election for Kashmir. Like India would be done in Kashmir would be done in the same phase as these other
Mm.
states because like the security situation would be handled. But now they said they had to delay it so they could like make sure like the other phases are done and they
Mm.
have all the security personnel, which could possibly lead to it. And I think like it's not even just like there is like the fear like okay like separate people who are friendly to separatists or something like that could do it, but like also like we don't know what the voter turnout's going to be like.
Mm.
So like the last time like Kashmir had like a major state election, not 2014, but like I'm forgetting the year right now, but like that actually saw like pretty high turnout because there like a lot of Kashmiri Muslims were afraid of like the BJP coming to power in the state. But there's like the fear like okay, like a lot of Kashmir state elections, I mean a lot of Kashmir elections have like really horrific turnout because like it represents like a very big dissatisfaction with the process in Kashmir.
Yeah, as I
And
understand, there was a by-election in Srinagar in
yeah,
I think April 2017, and it was like a 6% turnout, right?
yeah, and exactly like it's like really pathetic turnout. And I know like I don't think like anyone's gonna openly say like, oh, this like the turnout doesn't matter to us. I think like yeah, like if you have 6% turnout like or low turnout, that like speaks really really badly, especially for a lot of like the Indian narratives. Is if you say like these elections prove that Kashmirs want to be proved part of India, if no one's voting, like that's pretty embarrassing in Indian state. So hopefully like their sole hold the elections, and hopefully people will come out to vote. But we'll see ultimately.
Now, I mean, as you probably know, India has a lot of insurgencies kind of running at the same time. There's a there's a Naxalite rebellion. There's the conflicts in the northeast states. There's Kashmir, obviously. Are there any like similarities to how India is trying to resolve these conflicts, or are they kind of all kind of in their own context?
I mean, so they all have their own kind of they have their own context with SART. So like a lot of say the Kashmir insurgency as well as the Northeast, like the kind of root issues of those conflicts gets back to like to the founding of India because so like when India and Pakistan became independent, like the territories that we know of India and Pakistan today were not united.
Mm,
There were a lot of independent kingdoms. I think like 500 plus independent kingdoms that had like some form of autonomy underneath the British Empire. And so like a lot of them were given like the choice of like either you join India and you join Pakistan. And like of course like a lot of these Pakistan and India both worked hard to win as many kingdoms as possible. And some of these kingdoms were really, really small. Like they're only some of them might be only a couple blocks.
mm,
Other ones were as large as like say state of like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, because there's the kingdom of Hyderabad,
mm,
or as we see Kashmir or even Balochistan.
mm,
And so, but the thing was like a lot of these states, like say Kashmir and the northeast of India, were part of these like kind of semi-autonomous Sorry, my nose is getting stuffed. I don't know why.
okay.
But a lot of these like kingdoms are part of these like semi-autonomous states who like a lot of like questions remain. So like how Kashmir joined the Indian Union. Like technically, even if you look at the UN resolution, it's like that India promised to hold a plebiscite to
Mm,
determine the final status of Kashmir. So that's like that political question is still up in the air. Northeast, like a lot of people still have never bought into there's still like a fair amount of people who have not bought into the idea of like, okay, we were autonomous before, now we're part of this, like we're part of India, but like we're like kind of neglected by India in a lot of senses. So like, what do we do with that? Uh,
mm,
and like even like with the Adivasis, like and like the Naxalites, because it's primarily Adivasi or like the original inhabitants of India,
mm,
like tribal people who do it, is that they had their own like autonomy and like they were promised like this that having like say over their affairs and having like people respect their land and stuff like that. So a lot of like insurgencies like, in general in South Asia come back to like the troubled period of independence and British colonialism and like trying to figure out like, oh, how do we make these political arrangements work?
mm,
So that's like so in terms of root causes, they have a lot of them have that in common. That said, like so in the north, both in the Northeast and in Kashmir, uh, so both of those involve the Indian military, and I brought up a point before, like specifically when you think of like the doctrine of subconventional warfare, or whatever the proper name, disco, is specifically Indian Army doctrine because the Indian Army, in terms of counterinsurgency, is only involved in border states. So they're involved in Kashmir and the Northeast. They were involved in Punjab,
mm,
but they're specifically not involved with the Naxalite rebellion at all, Naxalite insurgency at all. Uh, and they're like the argument that military makes is like we're only involved in places where there's like an international context. So like
mm,
technically, Kashmir, Pakistan's involved. In the Northeast, there was some evidence in the past, like China and Pakistan were involved in them in the past, not so much nowadays, but also like these forces, like the insurgent forces, will go to Bhutan, will go to Nepal, Bangladesh, or Myanmar to
mm,
retreat. So as a result, they need to be involved in that. And then like we saw like a lot of like Indian like say innovations using because the Northeast has been like happening since independence, like 19, well, have been has been happening since the 1950s. So like the insurgencies in the Northeast are some of the longest running that we've seen, while Kashmir is relatively recent. So there's some stuff like so the Indian military has a system called the grid system, where
mm,
essentially like the territories they control, they like divide it up in a grid, and like the idea is like they'll have like station patrol people like stationed in certain places strategically, so that way if there's a problem in one grid, they can like quickly like have enough forces get to that element of the grid
mm.
and control it. That's like a way to help set up domination. So we've seen like a similar strategy coming up in Kashmir in the initial years of like making sure they get domination so they can have like this grid system in place.
Mm.
So in that sense, like there's common strategies. Though, then like but then with the Naxalites, because like unlike say Kashmir and Northeast where the military is heavily involved, the Naxalites purely led by paramilitaries, so they have like adopted a different strategy.
Because this is happening in like the heartland of India, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So like in general, like the even though like a lot, not like a lot of military people will say this officially, is the military like militaries in general do not like being involved in counterinsurgency campaigns because it's like a very very different style of warfare that they're trained for. Like if you're fighting a counterinsurgency campaign, you don't get nice toys. Like there's no need for like a F-16 or
Mm,
something like that, while you're fighting a counterinsurgency campaign.
mm,
And also like like I always bring up this dilemma of when you're fighting, especially if you're India, where you're a liberal democratic party country, you're using your military forces on your own citizens, and that brings up like a whole lot of dilemmas
mm,
of what you want to do. And like it's also like very, very like besides it's very tough on the people who have to uh, live in these areas. Like it's also very tough on the military forces too,
mm,
because you can't just go. Even though like there's some people who have definitely like done horrific atrocities, like a lot. Like I'm not going like India has like a pretty atrocious I mean human rights record, and like a lot of these insurgency prone states.
mm,
But it's also like going okay for soldiers it's really hard. Like you can't just go firing on anybody. You can't treat anybody like an enemy combatant.
mm,
It's not like say regular warfare. Like if they're going against Pakistan, where like they shouldn't treat everybody like an enemy combatant, but like it's more understandable if they do. And for them, like India, like a lot of Indian military say like they don't want to become like India's counterinsurgency force because that's not what they're designed for. Like the military is designed to fight other militaries, not non-state actors. So for them, it's going okay. We can't find a real rationale to go to the heartland because there's no like real international connection. And like there's always debates happening in India. Like whenever there's like a major attack done by the Naxalites, they always say like, oh, we need to deploy the military to India. But
mm,
the military, like a lot of military officials, whether current or retired, would say, no, we should not do that.
mm. So I guess closing off. We have obviously, as you mentioned, upcoming elections in April. Do you think that we'll see any changes to the Kashmiri issue post-election, or do you think it's going to be more or less the same kind of thing?
Uh, if I'm feeling hopeful, I would hope it would change. But like I unfortunately right now think like there's a whole new momentum carrying it towards further conflict. And right now, like I don't know honestly like of any like political leader. Cause like so more than anything, like I'll like the argument I've made before is like regardless of what Pakistan does, Kashmiris are like Indian citizens, and
Mm,
ultimately like the duty of any democratic society is to respond to its citizens. If you're not and like Pakistan can only intervene because of like this huge dissatisfaction. So the question for me is like now what can you do to stop Pakistan? Because they're going that's part of policy, but yes, but you got to figure out how to like placate the Kashmiris themselves. And like more importantly, like you did have a period before where like the homegrown insurgency, as you will, was dead, and it was
mm,
like primarily foreign fighters. But you never cap, but no policymaker I know of, like there's like no, there was no real policymaker who actually capitalized on that, saying, "Hey, let's restart politics. Let's show like Kashmir is like there is like a better like that they should be part of India. We need to restart politics. Like we've turned to civilian life." And honestly, I see Kashmir still like spiraling out of control and probably getting worse. Not as bad as like the 90s, but I don't see the situation improving.
and
But one can hope.
and how about relations with Pakistan? Do you see any change with that post-election?
I mean, not really, because like at the end of the day, like I don't like one thing is like Modi has not faced a lot of criticism overall. Overall, I would say like towards the stance of Pakistan, the fact like because of course like people make fun of like his trips and stuff like that,
Mm,
but overall like I think there's like more broad consensus by like a lot of Indians like yeah we need to have a tougher hand on Pakistan. Like definitely like not demonize Pakistani like the average Pakistani like some people in the RSS and Hindu groups have been doing, but like I think it's like one thing that the Modi government was like demonstrating is like, okay, like a lot of Indians are sick of Pakistanis. Like as far as they're concerned, whether it be Imran Khan or Nawaz Sharif in power, that these guys don't ultimately hold the hands to like make India safer. Like it's the military that holds power, and I don't see the military really changing the policy. And as I see it, and I could with everything I'm saying, I could definitely be wrong on this, but like I don't see if the military is not going to change. I don't see like India fundamentally changing its policy now.
Hmm. So I guess my final question, and this is probably kind of weird, but um, as I understand, you live in DC. You live in where kind of the movers and shakers of American kind of foreign policy is staying at. Um, do you see any place for America in the current India Pakistan crisis? Or like, what do you think Washington should do to kind of alleviate the crisis?
So on the first part of the question of do do they see a role for America? Yes and no. So like if you look at the Indian point of view, they explicitly do not want the United States to be involved in like say negotiations of what happened to Kashmir. Because as far as like India is concerned, that's purely a bilateral issue, and there shouldn't be any international intervention. But that said, so like one of the weird things is like uh, both among Indians and Pakistanis, is the assumption that like if like things between India and Pakistan start escalating, like that country like the United States or Russia or but especially the United States, it'll be the United States that comes in and de-escalates the situation. So there's like a book by Moeed Yusuf, which pretty much who's like a Pakistani analyst at USIP, who pretty much like say in his thing of like examining like these like nuclear dynamics between India and Pakistan, pretty much said like, oh yeah, seems like, I, I mean I'm really simplifying here, but like going yeah like it seems like a third party like United States is what's supposed to be responsible to help make sure like tensions between India and Pakistan don't get out of control and
Hmm.
escalate beyond the control, which is partially why like the whole Balakot thing was scary is because like. Uh, because like I think more and like I'm getting off topic a little bit, but I think one reason why like the Balkan strikes like maybe freaked me out a little more than like stuff in the past was like neither my impression, especially on both the Indian side, talking to analysts and some foreign policymakers, and people I know who talk to Pakistan side, like there's no like real understanding of the threat to nuclear conflict like the United States and the Soviets did,
Hmm.
where like everybody knew what could happen if things escalated to war. Like, especially in American pop culture, even as someone growing up in the post-Cold War era, like we all knew like if anything nuclear happened, like American society is doomed and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Versus, and like also like the Soviet Union and the United States were not bordering each other.
Hmm.
They're like opposite sides of the world, and if they mess with each other, they did not mess with each other directly. They were like mess with each other like through proxy wars and stuff like that. Versus India and Pakistan, they're not only they both nuclear weapon powers, they they border each other and they're messing each other with each other directly. Of course, they have like places like Afghanistan where they like fight their own competition, but like yeah, like it's in within Indian and Pakistani territory that this competition is happening, and like more and more, and like, especially on at least my experience with the Indian side is like there's less discussion of like oh my God, like we could possibly go to nuclear war of like versus like oh like what can we do under nuclear umbrella before the Americans will come and step in and like solve everything for us.
Hmm.
And it's going oh my God like and like during the bulk code strikes going we didn't I mean there's some people who said like okay like Trump was actually doing stuff but going it seems like Trump's entire attention was on North Korea,
Hmm.
not South Asia. Like I don't remember any high profile trips happening in that era, so it's going like oh my God like the main power between these two countries to de-escalate stuff seems to be gone. Like I think like a lot of other countries try to play a role to de-escalate situations, but it's going okay. Like there is like this kind of weird thing. Like they need to avoid nuclear escalation or further escalation. They do seem to need a third party, and it's like and to one extent like the capture of the pilot by Pakistan like helped provide an avenue to defuse tensions with.
Hmm.
On the second part of your question of well like what should the United States do towards Kashmir and stuff like that? Like, so I kind of agree with like the general thing, like, okay, this needs to be solved by India and Pakistan. And right now, like, I don't think like one, India does not want international intervention, and I don't think it's at the point where Pakistan actually trusts the United States enough. 'Cause I think it views the United States as being too pro-India to
Mm,
actually be like, a good neutral power. And we see like especially with Israel Palestine how like US influence has probably hurt the peace process more than anything else.
mm,
Uh but I think like what it should do, of course, like keep a vigilant eye to make sure like tensions don't escalate de-escalate out of control. But also like just on the Pakistani side, like a lot of stuff like with the policy of extremism for like the longest time, especially even in the post 9/11 war era, the US essentially helped subsidize Pakistan sponsoring these proxies and stuff like that and
mm,
helped empower dictators. Like so I remember even like uh I'm not going to say I'm not allowed to say where I got this from, but like how essentially like the Americans would rather deal with the military people rather than the civilians because like oh military people are the ones who be able to do stuff for us, which makes sense. But going, but yeah, you're legitimizing military leadership and military control over civilian leadership in Pakistan, and that like completely undermines civilian rule and that undermines like creating like an actual democratic policy. So I think like the United States has to like stop like funding the military in Pakistan, like stop like providing like it's pretty much essentially subsidizing like the proxies and put pressure on like these proxies. Like US has already sanctioned a lot of these groups, but also like do what it can to like bring other groups to like other groups sponsored by the Pakistani intelligence and military on the international arena. And I'm
mm,
not saying like that America should support an arms race because I think right now like large strategic picture is like China's like trying to control Pakistan, and like I'm sure how the United States should deal with that. 'Cause I think like if India really wants to progress, it needs to make peace with Pakistan, and Pakistan same thing with Pakistan. But at the same time, we're going, okay, we can't keep on subsidizing the Pakistani military
mm,
for like supporting these proxies. At the same time, we also can't keep on relying on the Pakistani military to do stuff for us because that undermines the influence of the civilians. And what we need to do is like work towards getting civilians to power and like having make sure they have power to military.
mm. Okay. Well, I think that's basically it so far. So thanks for being on the podcast, then.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, let me just turn off the live part.